Boris Johnson is currently facing an investigation by the Commons Privileges Committee over Partygate. Now, that might sound a little obscure, but it has been considered to be significant because the Privileges Committee, that's made up of cross-party MPs, can decide whether or not Boris Johnson has broken the ministerial code. And that's significant because if he has, convention would be he should resign. As I say, though, that was the convention. Maybe that's changed because Boris Johnson has now ripped up the rules and seems to have overridden the convention that ministers who break the code should resign. There's a new paragraph in the code now. It's on the topic of punishments for breaches like lacking honesty or openness, which sounds like the kind of thing Boris Johnson might be found guilty of not living out in his career. And it says, where the Prime Minister retains his confidence in the minister, available sanctions include requiring some form of public apology, remedial action, or removal of ministerial salary for a period. The government has justified the change by saying it was recommended by both Lord Geit, the ethics advisor appointed by Boris Johnson, and the Committee on Standards of Public Life. That's a cross-party group of MPs not appointed by Boris Johnson. But it certainly is a convenient change for a Prime Minister under investigation. Before it was the convention, you've got to lose your job. Now it's written in the rules, maybe you can just apologise. That's not the only change made, though. And the most shameless edits involve Johnson's own preface to the code. Here's the version from 2019. You can see here that we've highlighted all the words that involve ethics in public life. He says of ministers, quote, "We must uphold the very highest standards of propriety, and that the precious principle of public life enshrined in this document, integrity, objectivity, accountability, transparency, honesty and leadership in the public interest must be honoured at all times." It's all very noble stuff. But here's the new version. As you can see, none about ethics. We have, though, highlighted one new addition, the summary at the end. After listing a bunch of policy objectives, Boris Johnson concludes by saying, as the leader of the government, my accountability is to Parliament and via the ballot box to the British people. In short, if my MPs won't topple me, I'm not going anywhere. You know, it raises questions, doesn't it, when the person under investigation changes the rules in a way that, looks pretty obviously to benefit them.
This speaks to the structural weakness of our constitution. Now, it might seem kind of absurd to viewers now, but the British constitution, which is uncodified, based on everyone behaving like a jolly good chap and upholding the rules, that was considered something to be proud of and something that should be exported around the world, backed up by guns, germs, genocide, and white-collar crime. But it was something that was a real source of pride. The thing about what Boris Johnson has just done is that it shows that if you don't want to be a good chap, there's nothing really stopping you. If you have the political leeway because your MPs don't want to rock the boat, they're scared of losing a general election, they're scared of losing their own seats, then fundamentally the mechanisms for ensuring standards in public life are totally broken. And I think that we were coming to this point for quite a long time. You first saw it with Priti Patel. She was seen to have broken the ministerial code, breached the ministerial code by bullying staff. She didn't resign. In fact, Boris Johnson mounted, a quite rallying defence of, the Conservative ministers going out and batting for Priti on morning broadcast rounds. After that, you had the really quite egregious stuff around who paid for his flat refurbishment. You had one of the highest possible fines from the Electoral Commission, which tells you, hey, something pretty serious has gone on here. But the mechanisms by which Parliament would hold him to account, the investigation by Lord Geit, well, that was totally toothless. So Boris Johnson was in a position where he can go, I'm just going to shrug off my own wrongdoing, pay the fine, and, that's that. And then further on from that, you had, I think, the attempt to, insulate Owen Paterson from having to sit out a simple parliamentary suspension. That tells you something about Boris Johnson's regard for the good chap model of the British Constitution. And now we're here where someone who is under investigation for their conduct while in public office is able to change the rules by which he is held to account. It's a total farce, but we've been on this road for a long time.
I mean, I have to say, I have kind of mixed feelings about this one, because I was today sort of imagining, if Jeremy Corbyn became Prime Minister, if there hadn't been that whole vicious campaign against him for 2 years, both inside and outside the party, if he had won that election, I can imagine all sorts of chicanery where you've got sort of like people trying to bring him down outside of an election. And I think we'd probably be making the argument that, look, he won a general election. It shouldn't be down to obscure committees to bring this guy down. It should be down to the voters. And so, it is transparent that this guy who's very dishonest, who is not very honourable, has now rewritten the rules to benefit himself. At the same time, I do kind of believe in the principle that the final arbiter should be the electorate. I don't know, how do we make sense of this conflict I'm in, Ash? My internal conflict. Can you resolve it?
Well, I think that you raise a good point, right? Which is also when you've got these non-democratic means of accountability, then they can be used for non-democratic aims. I think I agree with you wholeheartedly in that case. But when you've got a situation where MPs are disincentivized from acting on their constituents' wishes in this case, there has been, a majority of people saying, yes, he should resign over Partygate, or, no, I wouldn't vote for him. Polling bears that out. But because MPs are like, well, I don't want to lose my seat either, you have a broken method of holding the Prime Minister to account. And I don't think that it's inappropriate that there are rules for public life and for ministerial life, and that those rules are perhaps different from your average MP. I guess the thing that I would finish up by saying is we're not voting for the Prime Minister when we vote for a party. I'm just talking like in strict electoral system terms. We're voting for the party that we want to form a government. So I don't think that in terms of the British Constitution as it is, the voting system that we have as it is, there's necessarily a big conflict in saying, look, change the Prime Minister, but your party still has a mandate to form a government. There's not really a conflict there. I think that what you're suggesting would be a much bigger change of the electoral system that you have, where it's made explicit that you are voting for the Prime Minister. So if he is to step down, it's because he's been held to account through democratic means rather than something like a committee or a breach of the ministerial code.
Maybe we live in the worst of both worlds, because you could say we'll leave it down to the electorate if you have a proper democracy in to the extent that you really have a proper choice over who your MP is. Because I suppose at the moment you do have a bit of a situation which encourages stalemate, because obviously the leader of the Conservative Party has a big say in who gets to stand in elections. That means all of these MPs, the same in the Labour Party, by the way, all these MPs have a real vested interest in protecting their leader. And so you don't get accountability from the rules, and you don't get accountability from democracy, because it's such a closed system. Potentially, if we had proportional representation, or if we had open primaries, for example, then democratic accountability would work better. So we wouldn't need to rely on these obscure committees enforcing the rules. All of us here at Novara Media are working harder than ever to keep scrutinising establishment politicians and the media barons who protect them. We don't have billionaire funders. We don't have advertising partnerships. We're funded entirely by you. If you've ever thought about supporting us, now's the time to go to novaramedia.com/support and donate anything you can from just £1 per month. Defy the corporate media. Join our monthly supporters and help build our supporter base to 10,000 strong.